morning. Today is Sunday. It is Zayin Oder Sheni Tovshin Ayin Dalid. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamar Tovshin Yud Aleph Tovshin Yud Beis in the Mamar Yatzarti Shabbos Pashas Vayikra Gimel Nisan Tovshin Yud Beis. We are on page Reish Nun Dalid. 7 lines from the top, at the full stop, at the word V'tam Hadover. The line starts Afilu Prat Kal. That's in the middle of chapter 5. Beis Hey. A very brief synopsis of what we've learned until now. This is from the Haftorah of Pashas Vayikra, which we just read yesterday. And it begins with the pasuk Am zu Yatzarti li, this nation I created for myself, Hashem says, Tehilasi Saperu, they will speak my praise. They will tell my praise. The Rebbe asked, first of all, the Rebbe brought the Gemara in Menachos, where the Gemara brings a number, remember the story with the Tana, I believe it was, Tana or the Amoira, who was standing by the door of the Beis Medrash, and there was a question whether to let him in or not, and they let him in, and then he looked upset. So the one that was giving the shiur said an agadata, and he responded with an agadata, and the agadata that he responded with was a single word that refers to a multitude of things. So he used the word adir, he used the word Yedid, he used the word toiv, and also zeh. Concerning zeh, he said, let this one come and receive this from this one and give it to this. Let this one come as a reference to Moshe, and receive this as a reference to the Torah. From this is Hashem, and give it to this is the Yidden. And for each of the each of these references, the Gemara he wrote a pasuk that we see that the Torah is called this, Moshe is called this, Hashem is called this, and the Yidden are called this. Where do we see that the Yidden are called this? This is our pasuk, Am zu Yatzarti. This is the nation. This nation I created. So the Rebbe asked, what's so special about this? If you talk about Adir, strong, friend, good, those are all the descriptions of a special quality. This zu seems to be a generic term, a neutral term. It doesn't seem to denote anything. So there's one question. Also the question was, why does it say zu lashon nekeva in a feminine expression? We find sometimes that the Yidden are referred to as zeh, ki amcha hagoya zeh. Why lashon nekeva? So the Rebbe began first by explaining the difference between koi and zeh. All the prophets prophesied with the word koi. So spoke Hashem, they would say. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied with the word zeh. This is what Hashem said. The difference being that koi is a more distant, obscure type of revelation, whereas zeh is a direct and open revelation. All the prophets prophesied b'aspaklaria she'ena me'ira, says the Gemara, in a manner of their revelation was in a manner of a non-illuminated magnifying glass. There was some obstruction, as it were. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied, his revelation was b'aspaklaria ha'me'ira, with an illuminated magnifying glass, without obstruction. The Rebbe also explained that the difference between that the true zeh means this, which means that it is the final and ultimate being, as it were, or revelation. And that is only truly possible when we talk about Kedusha, about holiness, existence. All of existence depends on something else. The world doesn't have any independent existence, it depends on Hashem. Even revelation, the Rebbe went on to say, is also dependent on something that's greater than it. It reveals something that's behind it, and without that, it doesn't exist. So therefore, the only true zeh, the only true description of zeh, can only truly be said about whom? About Hashem himself. The Rebbe explained that a Yid, through being connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, is able to be at the level of zeh, to have this, or zu in the feminine, right? Why? Because when we talk about, even though when we talk about Zeh, it's a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu, even by contrast to all other prophets, so how could we refer to every single Jew as Zeh or Zu? That's by virtue of a Yid serving Hashem through Kabbalah's oil, through the acceptance of yoke. And the Rebbe explained that that's where we're up to in Ois Hey. The Rebbe explained that when we talk about a Yid connecting to the very essence of Hashem through Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning to say that Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who reveals the Yid's connection to Hashem, and that connection is in a manner that a Yid serves Hashem with Kabbalah Sil, with the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, beyond rationality, beyond emotional motivations, beyond rational motivations, but rather Kabbalah's oil, just accepting the yoke of heaven. Serving Hashem through the acceptance of the yoke of heaven is the ultimate expression of a Yid's essential connection to the very essence of Hashem. Which means to say that he fulfills Hashem's will in a manner where the lightest and easiest mitzvah is equal to him as the harshest and the most stringent mitzvah. And the Rebbe went on to explain the difference between. So why is that? In other words, he fulfills it simply because it is Hashem's will. And the Rebbe went on to explain the difference between the power of will, of desire, and the power of intellect. When we talk about intellect, if we talk about an intellectual idea that's made up of details, meaning to say that it's an idea that's built upon a number of intellectual building blocks, so each one of them is indigenous in the sense that if you understand that aspect of the intellect, you understand it. In order to understand the total svara sichlis, the total intellectual idea, then you need to have an understanding of a number of ideas that make up the bigger idea, as it were. So it is conceivably possible that you understand one part of it, but you don't understand the other part of it. It doesn't mean that you don't understand it at all. You understand part of it. Whereas when you talk about will, when a person wants something, right? So if that something is made up, the something that one desires, the sum total of what one desires is made up of a number of components. If there's one aspect missing, his will hasn't been fulfilled. Because what he wants is the ultimate thing, and not the detail. The inherent difference that Rebbe also he brings in the references. He brings other references to this idea. There is a halacha that a ger, a convert that wants to come to convert to Yiddishkeit, has to accept all the mitzvahs. So the halacha is that if a ger accepts all the mitzvahs besides one detail, besides one mitzvah, even if it's a divrei sofrim, even if it's a rabbinic mitzvah, you can't accept him. Because that doesn't mean that he accepted 612 and not 613 mitzvahs. It means that he's lacking the entire acceptance. Why? Because we're talking about him accepting Hashem's will. And Hashem's will is all the 613 mitzvahs. The Rambam says, I believe in Pirush Mishnayos, that one of the fundamental principles of faith is believing that the Torah is from Hashem. If a person accepts that the entire Torah is from Hashem, besides one detail, V'shem ishtei meheitavil, he accepts everything. He accepts Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and he accepts Shema Yisrael. One thing, the Torah says that the name of his wife was Meheitavil. I forgot who the husband was, but V'shem ishtei meheitavil accepts everything besides that. It doesn't mean that he's denying only one aspect of the Torah. It means that he's denying the entire Torah. Why? Because when we talk about Hashem's will, it's the entire will. And that is why, why is there a difference between will or desire and intellect? Because this will, Rotzen, is a keach makif, a transcendental faculty. It's not related to the aspects and the details of that which the person wants and desires, or Hashem wants and desires. Whereas the intellect is a keach primi, it is an internal faculty which relates to the inner, the aspects of what one is trying to perceive. So as a result, Vitam Hadover. That's where we're up to. Page Nation Dalet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Vitam Hadover. Why is there this difference that when we talk about intellect, if you don't understand the sum total of the idea, you still could understand part of it. Whereas when we talk about Rotzen, will, if one aspect is missing, then the whole will isn't fulfilled. The reason is because Rotzen is a transcendental faculty, and a very lofty, transcendental faculty, which is not connected to internal matters. Move on, going back to Hashem's will. In mitzvahs, where the harshest mitzvah and the easiest mitzvah are equal, from that point of view, of course in mitzvahs you have the kavanah pratis of the mitzvah, the detailed aspects of each mitzvah in which they are different, but there is that idea in which all mitzvahs are equal, and that is so far as them being what? Hashem's will. Right? So therefore, moving from this is understood, that from the perspective of the celestial will, which means Hashem's will, ein hefresh, there is no difference between the easiest mitzvah and the harshest mitzvah from that point of view. And therefore, when a man wants to fulfill Hashem's will from that point of view, in other words, from the point of view of the acceptance of yoke, that he just fulfills mitzvahs from the perspective that they are Hashem's will, then he's not bothered if this mitzvah is from the easiest mitzvahs or the harshest mitzvah, because he fulfills them equally. His motivation and his desire to fulfill them, his commitment to fulfill them, is because of Hashem's will. And this is because the because he fulfills the mitzvahs not as a result of rationality, of rational thinking, of rational motivation. But rather because of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Like a simple servant. Or at a higher level, a son who is a servant. What's the difference between a son, the relationship between a son and a father, and a servant and a master? And therefore, what is the meaning of a son that is a servant? Commission is boiled, as explained earlier. The Rebbe says the Mamar of Basi Legani of this year, of Tavshin Yud Beis. The advantage, the special quality that a son possesses over and above a servant. The special quality of a son who is a servant over and above a simple servant. The servant who's not the son, just a straightforward servant, he fulfills the master's will. But he doesn't necessarily feel the desire of the master. Any day is time, and he doesn't know the reason why the master wants him to do this particular task. But when we talk about a son, who feels the desire of whom? Of his father, and he knows the reason for the desire. And nevertheless, he fulfills the desire of his father, not by virtue, not as a result of the reason, but rather to fulfill the desire of the master. So that is a higher level of what? Of service, where you know and appreciate the reason, and nevertheless you rise above that and you'll fulfill it because only in order for what? To fulfill the desire of the master. But in both of these instances, whether it's the service of Hashem as a simple servant or serving Hashem as a son who is a servant, in both these instances we're talking about fulfilling Hashem's will. Just because it's Hashem's will, mitzat kabbalas oil, because of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, the key. So therefore, what do you connect with? What do we connect with? Which aspect of Hashem do we connect with when we fulfill Hashem's will in this way with kabbalas oil? With the very essence of Hashem. And since it is specifically through the fulfillment of mitzvahs, through the acceptance of yoke of heaven, specifically through that we connect with the very essence of Hashem. Going back to the question, why does it say zu in the feminine tense? Lachein in the feminine expression. Lachein nemer am zu b'lashon nekeva. Therefore, in this verse, it refers to the nation of Israel with the word zu, this nation. With the in the feminine expression, haneshekol inyane, because in this sense, the entire inyan, the entire well, the mode, if you will, of the Jewish people in this sense is hu yosek kibul nekeva. His entire demeanor is being a clay kibul, a vessel to receive kabbalah soil, which is the keva, which is the idea of the feminine aspect, because the feminine aspect, kabbalistically and physically and so on and so forth, is the idea of kabbalah, receiving. The Ovid Avodas kabbalah soil, and the person serves Hashem with the acceptance of yoke. Through this, that's why it refers to it as zu in the feminine, but it's the idea through this, nasa b'china zeh, he becomes in the mode of zeh. In other words, the yid becomes at the level of zeh, which is usually reserved only for Moshe Rabbeinu, because this denotes, this points to one's connection to the very essence of Hashem. Okay. Now the Rebbe goes in chapter 6 and explains and defines, based on all of this, he explains the pasuk, Am zu Yatzarti li tilasi yisaperu. This nation I created for myself, they will tell my praises. So the simple meaning of Am zu Yatzarti li means, this is the nation that I created for myself. Here the Rebbe teaches, Am zu Yatzarti, that I made all of creation for this nation. All of creation was created for the purpose of this nation. What's the pshat? It says the Rebbe, chapter 6, V'zeu, Am zu Yatzarti li tilasi yisaperu. This is the meaning of this is the nation I created, they will tell my praises, pirush. Meaning is, Shekol ha'yishavos, all of creation, Yatzarti, Yitzir, all of creation, He bishvil amzu, is for this nation, which is what? For Yidden to serve Hashem. The amzu hu bishvil, and what is the purpose of this nation? The purpose of this nation is bishvil shetilasi yisaperu, so they should tell Hashem's praises. V'hainu, which means what's the relationship between this nation serving Hashem and their ability or permission, if you will, or their telling Hashem's praises correctly? It seems to denote that the telling of Hashem's praises through this nation, quote unquote, is when what? When it's amzu. What's the connection? What does zu denote? It's specifically when the service of Hashem, man's service of Hashem, is in a mode of zu, lashon nekeva. In the feminine expression, which is as mentioned before, shu'in kabbalas el, which is the idea of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. So in short, when a person serves Hashem, motivated purely by the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, azai efshel liyis, it's only then that it's possible that there should be tilasi yisaperu. It's only then is it possible that one should say Hashem's praises in a proper way, as intended by Hashem's intention, as intended by Hashem. For kasher aved, when a person serves Hashem by rational motivation, it's in a mode of someone gesturing before the king. If you remember, we learned the previous Shiur, the whole story where the Tana was standing before the Caesar, and then a heretic motioned to him, and he motioned back to him. So they asked him, what did he motion to you? He said, he motioned to me that Hashem has removed his protection from the Jewish people. So they said, what did you motion back to him? He said, I motioned back to him that Hashem watches over us. So they asked the heretic, what did you motion to him? So he said, I motioned to him that Hashem removed his protection from the Jewish people. And what did he motion back to you? He says, I don't know. So they said to him, somebody who stands before the king is machvele b'mochi kama malka. Somebody who stands before the king and he gestures before the king and he doesn't know what is being gestured to him, has no business gesturing before the king. They took him out and they killed him. He was put to death. That's considered merida b'malchus. It's considered what's the word? No, treason. And the Rebbe also explains in the Sikha why the gestures of the Tana wasn't considered treason. Explains because it wasn't. We're not going to Arichas Habir, but mentioned it before also that his was enhancing the Caesar's honor rather than going against it. Whereas if he just gestures, it means that it goes completely against the Caesar. Anyway, so if a person stands before the king Hashem and serves him because of rational motivation, he's gesturing before the king. That's treason. Even if he's a complete tzaddik. This is a quote from Tanya. Serving Hashem with fear and tremendous love of pleasure. And in other words, he serves Hashem as the highest level. Nevertheless, he needs to contemplate and think deeply that he stands before the king Hashem. And he serves Hashem with some sense of self-feeling. Yesh mishayev. There is the one who loves. And although his self-feeling is from a perspective of what? The top of page Reish Hey. That he loves. So what's his yeshus? It's not that his yeshus, his self-feeling is something other than Hashem. His self-feeling is that I love Hashem. So what's terrible about that? Nonetheless, there is some sense of what? Of self-feeling. If that's the case, in that sense, his service of Hashem is in a mode of gesturing before the king. It's only when one serves Hashem from a sense of duty, because of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, amzu, which the definition of amzu means what? In other words, this nation, when we say this, according to this explanation, it means what? When one serves Hashem with Kabbalah Seil, which through this type of serving Hashem, he ties himself with the very essence of Hashem, which is the idea of zeh meaning the very essence of Hashem. It's only then, at that level, only in this mode of serving Hashem, one can tell Hashem's praises, which means what? He actually tells Hashem's praises, but even a masim, in an appropriate way, as intended by Hashem. Now, he refers to Amzu. He refers to the nation of Israel here with the word Am. Am means nation. Why does he choose specifically the word Am? Because of Amzu, Am Daike. The Pasuk stresses and chooses the word specifically Am. Although the description Am denotes a low level. The Alter Rebbe says in Shariach V'Emunah, where he talks about the idea of Ein Melech B'loi Am. There is no king without a nation. That there needs to be a world and created beings and creatures. That's when Hashem is called Melech, Malchus. He talks about the level of Malchus, right? So he says Am is Meloshen Oimemos. Am is from the expression of Oimemos, which means darkened or obscured, as it were, right? Which means to say that it's only when there is tzimtzum and helem, concealment and contraction and concealment, that world can come into being. And in that itself, we're talking about the very lowest levels. Bereiv am hadras melech, when we talk about a nation, it means beings. So he says over there that even if a king will have a multitude of children, he still can't be a king, they're his children. And even if he had many noblemen, he's not really a king in the truest sense. You need the nation, you need the people. So when you say am, what does it denote? The common folk, as it were, right? Sorry? Yeah, it means the multitude, the regular people, right? Not the great men and not the children, right? So when we say am zur, it seems to say when you say am, you're talking about the very lowest levels of a yid, as it were. So why are we referring to the idea of am? So the Rebbe says a very powerful word. Because when we talk about the idea, because through the idea of Kabbalah Seil, serving Hashem, through Kabbalah Seil, which is zu, the idea of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, through serving Hashem with the acceptance of the yoke, even in the very lowest level of am, the connection with the very essence of Hashem comes about. Through serving Hashem with Kabbalah Seil, even someone who's at the lowest level becomes at the level of zeh. What is the explanation? So it never goes back to the idea. All prophets prophesied with the word koi, thus or so. Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied with the word zeh. So it seems that zeh is related to whom? To the highest levels. So we see that there are differences. Only Moshe Rabbeinu that could be at the level of zeh. A yid could be at the level of zeh only if he serves Hashem with Kabbalah Seil, through his connection to Moshe Rabbeinu, and all of a sudden we say that what? That every simple person could, if he serves Hashem with Kabbalah Seil, becomes at the level of zu or zeh. How does that work? Even though indeed there are differences between prophets, that all prophets prophesied with Koi and not with Zeh, and whereas Moshe Rabbeinu only prophesied with Zeh. The Rebbe says true. When we talk about levels, different levels of godliness, not the very essence of Hashem. When you talk about levels, through which we only reach the revelations or the manifestations of Hashem, over there are differences. In other words, Zeh denotes revelation, right? Or open. Now, if you talk about revelations, manifestations of Hashem, they also could be in a mode of Koi or in a mode of Zeh. So in that sense, so from this point of view, from the point of view of revelations, even the levels of prophets, who are at the very, in other words, higher, obviously, than Am. You're talking about people that are on a very, very high level. And people through whom the Spirit of Hashem spoke, and Hashem's word was on their tongue. Nevertheless, they are only at the level of Koi, relative to Moshe. So when we talk about revelations, and when we talk about a person linking into Hashem through, as it were, self-development or refinement, rising up to some level, you have differences. There is Koi, there is Zeh, and so on and so forth. So in other words, when we talk about a person connecting to Hashem through his inner faculties, through the love of Hashem, fear of Hashem, intellectual, his abundance, and so on and so forth. So to the degree that I am spiritually refined, or to the degree that I am at a spiritual high level, that is the level of spirituality or godliness to which I will link him to. But that's all in the relationship between the levels of the person and the levels of godliness. But when we talk about the essence of the person and the essence of godliness, over there's no difference. However, when we serve Hashem through the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, through which what comes about is the connection to the very essence of Hashem, which is beyond lights and revelations, beyond manifestations. Then even someone who is at the level of Am, at a very low level, that person also can become at the level of Zeh. This, meaning connecting to the very essence of Hashem. By virtue of the idea of the acceptance of yoke, the greatest of all men, and the simplest of all men, they're equal. When it comes to the acceptance of yoke, Kabbalah's acceptance of yoke is equal by everyone. Just as when it comes to mitzvahs, if we serve Hashem by virtue of accepting the yoke of Hashem, of heaven, then the easiest mitzvah and the strictest mitzvah are equal because we're fulfilling Hashem's will. So too in people, the greatest and the simplest, from the perspective of Kabbalah's oil, are equal. And then even the simplest could connect to Hashem in a mode of Zeh. Chapter 7. Let's try to finish. The Medrash says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says to the Jewish people, in this world, you said to me one time, Zekeli, this is my God. When the Jewish people came to the splitting of the sea, they said Zeh. This is my God, they said it once. Hashem says to the Jewish people, in the time to come, you will say this thing twice. You will say Zeh twice. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, which we said last night in V'yitin L'cha, V'amar V'yemahu, and a little louder. V'amar V'yemahu, it'll be said, and he'll say on that day, when Mashiach will come, in the time to come, Hinei Elokeinu Zeh, here is this our God, pointing with our finger. Zeh Havaya Gomer. This is our God. So the first time it says Zeh, Hinei Elokeinu Zeh. The second time it says what? Zeh Havaya. I don't think we're going to finish because it gets a little Kabbalistic and complicated a little later. Okay, I think we're going to stop here. We'll finish Mitzvah tomorrow, and we'll probably also start the next Maimer.